In this video, we'll be taking a look at 5 college basketball games happening on February 7th, 2026, and providing you with free team picks and total picks for each one of those games, so 10 picks in total. Welcome back to Cash Out Sports. Let's dive right into it. Oh, and don't forget to subscribe and to click the bell icon to get notified as soon as these videos get released so that you have more time to plan out your bets as we provide these videos on a daily basis. I can guarantee that you'll have all the important information that you'll need on these 5 college basketball games after fully watching this video. One more thing before we start, if you would like to gain access to our best exclusive sports picks to take your journey to the next level, then check out our Patreon in the link down below, where we offer our best single picks, parlay picks, and much more. Now let's get started. Duke versus North Carolina. Walking into the Dean Dome on a rivalry night like this feels less like showing up for a college game and more like stepping into a prize fight. The building hums, that light blue everywhere, and you can almost feel the pressure leaning down on the floor before the ball even goes up. On one side, there is the visiting giant, Duke, rolling through the season with a record that looks like a video game on rookie mode, sitting at roughly 21-1 overall and perfect in league play at around 10-0. They have been one of the most balanced groups in the country, rating near the very top nationally both on offense and on defense, the kind of profile that gets talked about non-stop on ESPN and across social media. They squeeze the life out of possessions, keep opponents in the low scoring range, and still manage to score efficiently themselves, which is a frustrating combo for anyone trying to chase them. On the other side, there is North Carolina, sitting at around 18-4, quietly putting together a season that would be headline material if their rival up the road were not steamrolling everyone. At home, they have been perfect, roughly 13-0 in Chapel Hill, and something like 16-4 across their last 20 overall, which is not just good, it is nobody comes in here and feels comfortable good. Honestly, that is the kind of home stretch where even neutral fans start to feel like the building itself is part of the roster. The market has leaned hard into the Duke aura, treating them as the clear favorite even on the road, and that is where this gets interesting. You are not just looking at talent, you are looking at perception, and perception says Duke is the unstoppable machine while Carolina is the team that is supposed to be hanging on. In reality, this shapes up more like a tug of war between a defensive bully and a rhythm team that turns games into long runs of momentum, especially when the home crowd smells blood. Stylistically, Duke loves to slow everything down, almost like a coach who keeps hitting the brake pedal, forcing half-court possessions and testing your patience as much as your skill. They sit near the top of the country in defensive metrics, limit clean looks, and they are happy to walk the ball up, run their sets, and turn every trip into a little exam. North Carolina lives more on pace and rhythm, with an offense that stacks points in bunches, grading as one of the better scoring units in the nation, while their defense is solid but not quite in that elite, lock-you-in-a-box tier. They feed off a sense of flow, get the ball moving from side to side, and when they start running downhill with the fans roaring, it feels like the other team is trying to stand still in a river. Recent history between these two programs also refuses to behave like a simple numbers play. Duke has been very strong in the broader schedule, covering frequently this season, but in this rivalry they have often won the game while falling short of the number. Across the last chunk of meetings, they sit at something like 6-12 against the spread, which is a fancy way of saying the games tend to be closer than the perception around Duke suggests. Carolina, meanwhile, has ridden its home energy through a brutal run of opponents, using that crowd almost like a sixth defender when they need a stop or a surge. The personnel picture lines up in a way that favors a true heavyweight feel rather than a mismatch. The headline freshmen that everyone tunes in to watch, Duke's Cameron Boozer and Carolina's Caleb Wilson, are both active parts of their current rosters and have been running in the main rotations. Both teams have their top options ready, but each side is missing some depth pieces up front, with Duke lacking a key big for the long haul and North Carolina short on a couple of reserve big men who would normally soak up fouls. That might sound minor, but in a rivalry game where the whistle usually shows up as its own character, that shortage of extra bodies inside can make every foul feel heavier. There is another wrinkle, which is Duke's recent brush with illness around the locker room, with players dealing with sickness in the not-so-distant past. They still handled business, which tells you plenty about their ceiling, but it also reminds you that they are not some untouchable robot program. They are walking into the one building where this particular opponent has not dropped a game this season, and that building absolutely knows how to use tempo swings, crowd noise, and pressure on officials to tilt the feel of a game. In a matchup that traditionally plays tighter than the hype, where separation has often been more theory than reality, having a healthy cushion with an undefeated at-home underdog starts to look less like a risk and more like a calculated move that respects how wild this rivalry can get. As our first pick for this matchup, the North Carolina Tar Heels to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Both teams score freely, sit among the more productive attacks in the country, and carry that reputation of if you blink, someone just hit another three or got a layup. Carolina, especially, has been living in high-scoring environments lately, with games that feel like races to see who gets to a big number first. It is easy to look at that and think, okay, this one is going to turn into a track meet. Here is the thing, though, the way Duke has actually been closing out games lately tells a slightly different story. Their recent results have included comfortable wins where the final scores landed in more modest ranges, the kind where their defense took control and never gave it back. They are perfectly comfortable in slower, methodical contests where the opponent ends up stuck in the low-scoring neighborhood while Duke quietly builds a lead. That is not the vibe of a team that needs chaos to succeed. Their defensive identity is the anchor. They sit near the very top nationally in how well they guard, limit opponents to frustratingly low point totals, and force you to work through half-court sets again and again. When a team like that walks into a rivalry game, the natural adrenaline does not always turn into a shootout. Sometimes it turns into nerves, tighter decision-making, and a lot of possessions where both sides spend more time trying not to make the big mistake. Carolina's recent string of high-scoring outings is real, and it matters, but the context is that many of those games came against opponents that were more willing, or more desperate, to get into an up-and-down rhythm with them. Duke does not need to play that way, and usually does not. They can slow things down, pick their spots, and force the Tar Heels to execute late into the shot clock rather than just run free. Even in this very rivalry, a lot of the big memories are of huge shots, but they often came in games that were closer, tighter, and more grinded out than people remember. Honestly, rivalry pressure alone can drag scoring down a bit. Coaches shorten rotations, whistle management becomes a subplot, and every trip feels like it might swing momentum. Crowds love offense, but they roar just as loudly for a big defensive stand, and Carolina's unbeaten run at home has not only been about making shots, it has also included very timely stretches of defense where they squeeze teams late. When you picture this one in the final minutes, it feels more like a tense, possession-by-possession battle than a free-flowing, 90-point festival. That is where the number on the total starts to feel a touch inflated. The market has clearly leaned into the offensive reputations, the highlight reels, and the history of high scoring in many of these matchups. Yet the current version of Duke leans so heavily on defensive control, and this particular environment in Chapel Hill can absolutely support stretches of tough defense from the home side too. Put all that together, and the more you think about it, the easier it is to see a game script where the scoring lands a shade below what most people are expecting. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Illinois versus Michigan State. Breslin Center on a Saturday night with a top 10 team hosting a top 5 opponent feels more like a heavyweight bout than your usual conference grind. And the funny part is that the number hanging out there treats it like a coin flip. Illinois walks in wearing the underdog label, but nothing about their profile screams plucky or overmatched. A group sitting at 20-3 overall and 11-1 in league play, with a wild 12-1 mark away from Champaign, is used to walking into loud gyms and hearing the noise tilt their way by the final horn. That trip to Nebraska where they took down a top 5 Huskers team on the road, in a game that set a viewership record on FES 1, felt like one of those subtle turning points where a team realizes it can handle the biggest stage. Right after that, dropping a 40-point hammer on Northwestern sent a pretty blunt message about the gap between Illinois and the mushy middle of the conference. Moments like that matter because they are not just about numbers, they are about a locker room that starts to understand it can be the bully, even when the jerseys say visitor. Now, the twist is that Illinois is not even at full strength, and that usually scares people away from an underdog, but here it has forced a kind of clarity. Kylan Boswell is out with the hand injury, Ty Rogers is still not ready for game action after his knee issue, and Jason Jackstice is sidelined for the season, so the rotation has tightened in a good way. The players who are out there know exactly when and where their shots are supposed to come. They crash the glass like it is a job, and the offense has settled into that top-tier spot in the country in terms of efficiency and feel. Honestly, that kind of defined identity can be worth as much as a star guard when you step into a hostile building. On the other side, Michigan State looks like a classic Tom Izzo group that fans could recognize from almost any era, only with a modern polish. The record sits at 19-4 overall and 9-3 in the conference, and they hang their hat on defense, holding opponents to the mid-60s and ranking near the top nationally in efficiency on that end. They are also a different animal at home, where the crowd, the comfort, and the routine combine into that familiar East Lansing buzz that makes opposing guards think twice before every pass. They have had to absorb their own big injury with Caleb Glenn lost for the year to a knee problem, which quietly trims some of the front court depth that was so hyped over the summer. That does not mean the Spartans are weak inside, but it does mean they are a little less intimidating physically than the roster sheet once suggested. Here is the thing, when you line up an offense that scores at an elite level and punishes the offensive glass against a defense that thrives on positioning and toughness, what you often get is a close game that tilts on a few plays late. Illinois has shown again and again that it does not blink on the road, and when you pair that with the extra value built into an underdog number, the matchup starts to look like a situation where the supposedly lesser team actually brings the more reliable scoring punch and rebounding edge. In a game that figures to swing on 2 or 3 possessions, taking the side that can generate cleaner looks and second chances while also pocketing the points feels like the sharper way to ride this one. As our first pick for this matchup, the Illinois Fighting Illini to cover the spread as underdogs is our full game side pick. Illinois scores in the mid-80s on average, Michigan State sits not too far behind in the high 70s, and if you simply added those together like a calculator, you would expect something like a track meet. Fans see those scoring averages on ESPN or KenPom and immediately think, alright, this has to fly past the posted total. Let me explain why that first instinct has been wrong more often than it has been right for Illinois this season. Despite the fireworks on offense, their games have leaned toward the under, with final scores landing beneath the posted number more frequently than above it and usually by a decent cushion. That happens when a team couples an elite offense with a defense that is better than the narrative, sitting comfortably inside the national top tier in points allowed, and a coach who does not mind winning games in the low 70s if that is what the matchup calls for. Brad Underwood is not chasing style points, he is chasing control, and control usually means fewer possessions, smarter shots, and a little more patience than the reputation suggests. Michigan State pulls the tempo in the same direction, only from the other side of the ball. Their defense sits near the top nationally, they keep opponents in the mid-60s, and they are specialists at dragging teams into longer half-court possessions where every cut is scouted and every pass is contested. Izzo has no interest in letting Illinois turn this into a free-flowing pickup game, especially in his own building. He would rather see his guys sprint back, wall off transition, and make every Illini possession burn some clock before they even start their action. The injury context quietly feeds the under angle too. Without Boswell, Illinois loses a key creator and a reliable scoring option on the perimeter, and with Rogers and Jackstice out as well, the rotation skews toward a slightly more deliberate, more physical style. Instead of constant 5-out spacing and wave after wave of quick triggers, there are more post touches, more emphasis on offensive rebounding, and more half-court execution. It is still high-level offense, just not pure run and gun. Big matchups like this also tend to tighten up as the minutes tick away. Both teams value every possession, both coaching staffs are obsessing over transition defense, and those last 5 minutes often look like a chess match rather than a sprint, with sets called on every trip and guys running through second and third actions before they even think about a shot. Sure, late fouls and free throws can inflate a score. Everyone who has sweated a ticket knows that feeling. But with two defenses capable of forcing tough looks and two coaches who are comfortable slowing things down when it matters, the overall script leans toward a total that finishes lower than the raw scoring averages would suggest. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Houston versus BYU. Houston walking into Provo feels like the classic clash of identities, the bruiser against the fireworks show. One side brings a defense that squeezes the life out of possessions, the other leans into pace and space and trusts a loud building to tilt momentum. Houston comes in sitting in that national contender tier with a record like 20-2 that tells you they rarely beat themselves and a scoring defense that hangs around the low 60s per game. They pressure the ball, they body you on screens, and they treat every rebound like it is the last loose ball of March. It is not flashy, it is not pretty, but it wears on teams, especially when you look up in the second half and realize every catch feels crowded and every drive feels like traffic. BYU, on the other hand, leans into a very different personality. Kevin Young has them running that modern, NBA-flavored, 5-out system, spacing the floor, hunting threes, and letting their playmakers read the floor on the fly. Their offense can stack points in a hurry, which is fun if you love shot making, but it also invites swings, hot stretches, and cold stretches that can flip a game in a few trips. Over the last handful of games, they have looked a little wobbly, with just one win in their last 5 and no covers in their last 7, which is a fancy way of saying the market has been a step ahead of them lately. The scoring is still there, but the efficiency and consistency have not always kept pace, especially when defenses punch back and do not bite on the first action. The wild card is that building in Provo. BYU at home has been a problem for almost everyone, piling up something like 13 wins in their last 14 there, and the crowd really does feel like a 6th defender at times. If you have ever watched a big game from that arena, you can almost hear the buzz through the TV, the way every early 3 feels like it might crack the roof a little. That kind of energy can absolutely rattle a young team, but Houston under this staff is built on being calm in chaos, leaning on physicality and habits instead of emotion. They have stacked 3 comfortable wins in a row coming in, with double-digit results against teams like UCF and Cincinnati, and it feels like they are slowly tightening the screws as the season moves deeper. So when you put it together, you have one group that has been winning and covering with their identity holding strong, and another that has been fun but volatile and has not rewarded anyone backing them recently. Houston's ability to create extra possessions on the glass, string together stops in key stretches, and stay poised when the crowd spikes gives them the cleaner path to cashing a favorite role in this kind of environment. As our first pick for this matchup, the Houston Cougars to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. BYU's offensive profile practically waves a big neon sign that says, "High scoring incoming." With that 5-out spacing, shooters parked around the arc, and drivers trying to get downhill, their games have started to resemble NBA box scores, with both teams often living in the high 80s or even nudging into the 90s. Recent results back that up, with their matchups regularly sailing past projected totals and their February slate turning into a bit of an overs magnet. There are stretches where their offense almost feels like a pickup run at a crowded gym, everybody sprinting, firing from deep, and living with the variance. Houston usually tilts games the other way, built around defense, physicality, and controlling pace. Even so, they are not some grind-only team that cannot score. They sit around the high 70s in points per game, they live at the free throw line, and their work on the offensive glass quietly acts like a cheat code for scoring because missed shots often turn into quick second chances. Against a defense like BYU's that gives up points in the low 70s on average and has not looked nearly as polished as its offense, those extra possessions and trips to the stripe matter a lot. It is not hard to picture a rhythm where Houston gets efficient looks inside and at the line while BYU continues to bomb away from 3, which usually lifts the combined number, even if one side slumps for a few minutes. There is also the setting itself. Provo's altitude sneaks up on visiting teams, especially in a game that features a lot of running and transition chances. The national stage vibe of a big conference matchup tends to bring out the aggressive side in coaches too, with quicker timeouts, quicker counter punches, and less interest in sitting on long, empty possessions. Both rosters have enough shot makers who enjoy the moment, the kind of players who will happily pull from deep or attack early in the clock when the crowd is humming. So instead of a slow, bruising contest in the low 60s, this project's much more like a game where both offenses find stretches of rhythm, the pace never totally dies, and the final total lands noticeably higher than a rock fight type score would. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. Florida versus Texas A&M. Reed Arena is going to feel a lot less like a random early February stop and a lot more like a neutral site in late March with all the noise and nerves that come with that atmosphere. You have the defending national champs walking into a loud, packed building, still sitting at the top of the conference race and trying to send a little reminder that the path through this league still runs through Gainesville. Florida has leaned into a real bully ball personality this season, playing fast, sure, but really hanging its hat on a front court that controls the glass and sits right at the top of the charts in both total and offensive rebounds. They do not just clean up misses, they turn every brick into a weapon, stacking extra possessions until opponents start to feel like they are stuck in quicksand. It is the kind of style that looks simple on paper but feels miserable to deal with for 40 straight minutes. On the other side, Texas A&M under first-year head coach Bucky McMillan wants this game to look like chaos from the opening tip. Full court pressure, traps in weird spots, guards flying around like it is a pickup run at the rec, threes going up early in the clock, and that wild buckyball energy that tries to rattle you more mentally than physically. The thing is that chaos comes with a price. This Aggies group is smaller, sits near the bottom nationally in defensive rebounding, and has already shown that when they meet real size, they can get shoved around on the boards. Tennessee hammered them on the glass in one meeting, and Alabama put a big number on them while beating them up again around the rim. Florida is basically the final boss version of those same problems, with an efficient offense that lives above 86 points per game, grades out in the top tier nationally, and is completely comfortable pounding the paint for putbacks and layups instead of just hoping the jumper is falling. Honestly, that is where this matchup feels so tilted stylistically. You have a veteran group that just came off a national title run, still shaped by Todd Golden's detail-heavy, numbers-driven approach, and fresh off a statement-type blowout of Alabama that felt like a loud message to the rest of the league. Texas A&M's press can flip a game against a young or sloppy opponent, but Florida brings experience, structure, and overwhelming size, which is exactly the profile that usually survives pressure, still gets to the rim, and slowly wears down a short-handed Aggie rotation that has already lost key forward Mackenzie McBako for the season with that foot issue. By the time you get late into the second half, the idea is that all those extra boards and physical possessions add up, and the team that keeps its composure and owns the glass is the one that stretches the margin rather than getting pulled into a coin flip. As our first pick for this matchup, the Florida Gators to cover the spread as favorites is our full game side pick. Texas A&M is up there in the national scoring tables at around 92 points a night, firing away from deep and using that press to create a kind of constant fast break feel. Florida, for its part, lives in the mid-80s in scoring, plays at one of the quickest tempos in the country, and is coming off back-to-back league wins where it touched 95 and 100. On the surface, it really does look like a recipe for a fireworks show. Here is the thing though, the story underneath those raw points looks a little different. Florida's identity this season is not just about racing up and down the floor. A huge part of what they do is squeeze you on defense and lock down the glass, ranking in the upper range nationally in defensive efficiency, holding opponents near 41% shooting, and sitting among the best in keeping teams from getting second looks. That is exactly the kind of profile that cuts into the volume of clean shots and extra chances that Texas A&M normally needs to push games into wild scorelines. Their perimeter defense matters a ton here too. Florida has been quietly excellent at running teams off the line, grading in that top band nationally in opponent three-point percentage, and that is the one area where the Aggies love to live, with several different shooters taking turns from deep. If those threes start to flatten out against longer, more disciplined closeouts, the game can shift from a track meet vibe to a slog where Texas A&M is forced to manufacture tougher looks in the half court against a front line that eats up drives. Recent trends give a little support to that quieter angle. Even with all the pace, Florida has leaned toward lower outcomes in several recent spots because their defense and rebounding have dragged opponents beneath what people expected. In a big league clash near the top of the table, possessions tend to slow down late, coaches lean on sets instead of heat checks, and every trip feels a little heavier. That matters even more with the Aggies missing that front court scoring punch from McBako, which makes it harder for them to keep stacking points inside when the outside shots stop falling. So while the tempo and the brand names say track meet, the actual path to points is a bit rockier. You can absolutely still get long stretches of pressure and wild energy, but that does not always translate to efficient scoring. All it takes is a couple of empty trips, a few 2 or 3 minute droughts on one side, and Florida's size turning what could have been layup lines into one-and-done possessions. As our second pick for this matchup, under the projected total is our full game total pick. Tennessee versus Kentucky. Rupp Arena on a Saturday night already feels like its own character, and this matchup gives it even more personality than usual. The lights, the noise, the low hum that builds before tip, it all hits different when a ranked Tennessee team walks in and the building knows it has the chance to flex a little pride. Kentucky is not sneaking up on anybody here. With a 16-7 record and an 11-2 mark at home, that crowd has seen this group use Rupp as a reset button whenever things wobble. Tennessee arrives with its own shine, sitting at 16-6 and inside the national top 25, and on paper the Vols carry that polished, all-around resume that analytics people like to screenshot. Tennessee's identity leans into balance, which sounds boring until you see how smothering it can feel. The offense is strong enough to live comfortably in the low 80s, but the real calling card is that defense, holding opponents right around the high 60s and sticking inside the top tier nationally in field goal and three-point percentage allowed. It feels like playing a team that constantly nudges you toward your second or third option on every possession, just enough to make every cut a little tighter and every screen a little more important. They prefer games where they can control tempo, slow the pulse, and almost make you forget what a clean, early clock look feels like. Kentucky answers that with chaos, the fun kind if you are wearing blue, and the terrifying kind if you are trying to run a structured half-court system against it. This group scores in the low 80s as well, but the real story is how quickly they can string runs together when Rupp gets loud. One broken play leads to a leak out, then a transition three, then a steal at half court, and suddenly what was a one-possession game flips into a run that feels bigger than the scoreboard even shows. The defense is less consistent than Tennessee's. It gives up points and has stretches that make fans shake their heads, but that actually feeds into the style because the game rarely settles into a slow grind for very long. The first meeting between these two this season is still sitting in the background of this one, almost like a clip that keeps auto-playing in everyone's mind. Kentucky walked into Knoxville, into a true hornet's nest, and still pulled out an 80-78 win, and that result quietly changed the way both locker rooms probably view this matchup. For Tennessee, that loss at home stings, especially for a team that prides itself on control and toughness in its own building. For Kentucky, it is proof that this particular matchup is not some unsolvable puzzle, that their style can rattle the Vols even in a hostile arena. Now flip the setting to Rupp, and the emotional fuel only piles higher. They are honoring the 1996 National Championship team, one of the most iconic squads this program has ever seen, and that alone carries a nostalgia jolt for every fan in the building. On top of that, Kentucky is rolling out those modernized denim-themed uniforms that throw it back to that era, which sounds like a small thing, but you know how fans and players respond to that kind of nostalgia. It turns the game into more than just another Southeastern Conference night. It feels like a showcase, a statement, a night where the current group knows it is stepping onto a stage built by legends. Tennessee's defensive structure will not just vanish in that environment, but communication on the road, especially when you rely on precise help and rotations, gets harder once the noise hits a certain level. All it takes is one or two possessions where a call is late or a switch is not clean, and Kentucky's attack turns that tiny crack into a full-blown run. The funny thing is that both teams have been unreliable against the number this season, each sitting at 9-13, which tells you the market has struggled to pin them down. So the edge here does not come from some long, neat trend. It comes from the spot itself, the crowd, the emotion, the confidence from winning in Knoxville, and the way Kentucky's style fits the chaos that Rupp loves. As our first pick for this matchup, the Kentucky Wildcats to cover the spread at home is our full game side pick. Tennessee's reputation still leans defensive in most people's minds, but if you zoom out and look at this season, the scoreboard has been busier than that label suggests. They are scoring north of 80 a night while still holding opponents under 70, and that combination creates a strange blend where games can start slow and still finish with a surprisingly high total. The offense is not just along for the ride, it has become an active partner, punishing mistakes and turning live ball turnovers into easy points. You can feel the shift from the classic grind-only identity to a more modern, two-way profile that still values stops, but is not allergic to pace. Kentucky leans even harder into that modern rhythm. This team is basically basketball caffeine, scoring over 81 per game and giving up more than 71, living in a world where clean offense and shaky defense often share the same night. Honestly, that volatility is part of the charm here. Possessions spin quickly from one end to the other, shots go up early, and long rebounds turn into races that would make any track coach proud. For totals, that style is gold. Recent form only adds fuel to the expectation that the scoreboard is going to be busy. Kentucky just dropped 94 on Oklahoma, which is not exactly a pushover, and that kind of performance reinforces how hot this offense can run when it feels comfortable. Tennessee, on the other side, just put up 84 on Ole Miss, which again reminds you that this group can absolutely fill it up when the lid comes off the rim. When both teams have fresh memories of big scoring nights, confidence tends to carry over, especially early in games, and you see more quick decisions and less hesitation. The first meeting between these two landed at 80-78, which already pushes you toward expecting another high-scoring chapter. Once teams have seen each other, the rematch often plays a little faster, not slower. The scouting is sharper, the players know where the soft spots live, and they go hunting them earlier in the clock. Instead of cautiously feeling things out, guards recognize matchups they like and attack them, bigs understand where the help is coming from, and shooters drift to spots they already hit from in the first game. Rupp's environment also leans toward tempo when the energy is this high. Celebrating a legendary championship team, unveiling special uniforms, playing on a big national stage, all of that pushes the emotional tempo up a notch. Coaches feel that too, even if they would never admit it on the record. There is a natural tendency to let guys run a bit, to lean into transition when it is there, and to trust that your offense can ride the wave. The crowd responds to quick strikes, fast breaks, and deep threes, and players, being human, feed off that reaction. Even with Tennessee's defensive numbers still shining, their games have not exactly been strangers to high totals this season. The mix of reliable scoring and a schedule full of aggressive opponents has nudged plenty of their matchups above the number. Kentucky's profile fits perfectly into that pattern, with its knack for both scoring in bunches and giving up enough clean looks to keep the opponent's total healthy. So when you put those threads together, the recent scoring bursts, the history of this matchup, the emotional setting, and the natural tendency toward faster stretches in a rematch, it all points toward a game where the scoreboard does plenty of talking. As our second pick for this matchup, over the projected total is our full game total pick. That's all for now, so if you have any other games you would like reviewed, then leave a comment down below with the game you would like analyzed, subscribe to our channel, leave a like on this video, and we'll get to it as soon as we possibly can. We would also love to hear your opinion on the picks presented to you in this video, whether you agree or disagree with them, so leave a comment down below and do let us know.